So we officially have just received brand new details about another brand new date now, or new deadlines that have now officially come out about when they are now hoping to finally approve of the fourth stimulus package, according to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Now, I know this might sound a little bit repetitive because we've had so many different dates, but it is just physically what's been happening. However, there is actually one very, very big difference between when they last announced it and when they announced it just very recently, which is pretty much yesterday from release date. And it's really about the fact that the first time, or the first couple of times when they originally announced their deadlines, which we already know what ended up happening, it was believed by a lot of people that they really just announced those deadlines in order to try to put pressure on Congress to try to approve it. But of course, we know what ended up happening. But the biggest difference right now is that because between now and the brand new deadline that they set, which is pretty much going to be on Halloween, so October 31st, 2021, there are actually many key dates between now and then that are expected to pop up. And the other big thing right now is that, as some of you guys heard, is that because of the debt ceiling and a lot of other stuff that we're going to definitely go into detail in today's update, it means that there's a lot of urgency, as in even more urgency now, to try to approve the package, because if they don't approve the package, there are so many things that are going to be on the line that are happening within our government that is going to potentially now impact even then. So the big thing that's going on is that in today's update is I really just want to go into details about what's going on with the fourth stimulus package, about the negotiations, what they still have to work on, and then also maybe just finishing this off, talking a little bit about why this fourth stimulus package is probably going to approve, or more or less is pretty much at least something is going to have to approve by the very end of this month. And hopefully this can actually be the true date, so it's not just like some kind of date that people are putting out there and then they're constantly moving over, but hopefully this can truly be it. So it's going to make a lot more sense. So we're going to dive into it, but maybe real fast, as always, before we begin, consider smashing the like button, because at least we finally have more details, and it is always just greatly appreciated for support. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell for similar videos, and as we get more videos or more updates, and also of course for other kinds of finance topics when it comes to just trying to work on our finances, especially during a time of much need. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts about us, just anything. Always great to say hi to new and familiar faces. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So just as mentioned, is that the big thing to note right now is that the official date that they have given is that they're trying to now approve of the fourth stimulus package by October 31st, essentially by Halloween. So hopefully on the actual date of Halloween, it's not as scary of a deadline, so it's maybe a little bit of a less scary Halloween this year, hopefully. But the big thing is that even before then is that it is believed by a lot of people that they're probably actually going to try to approve it even before this date, because the big thing is that the debt ceiling date from when the government is expected to run out of money is going to be around October 18th, give or take just about a couple of days. So we're going to dive into a little bit about why that's actually particularly significant and what's to happen. But in terms of what's going on with the actual negotiations with just fourth stimulus packages in general, is that the biggest thing that they are really working on right now is pretty much the one-word summary, is essentially just compromise. And so the reasoning what's going on is that because right now at this current time, as we know, is that there are many progressive Democrats inside that are essentially trying to hold firm onto approving not just one, but actually both stimulus packages together. Because keep in mind, there's actually technically many stimulus packages, but the big central package that they're really working on is pretty much, one is the physical infrastructure, and the second one is the social and human infrastructure. Because it is now basically set in stone, according to words and according to action as well, that most of these Democrats that we need, that have a lot of voice in trying to get this through, pretty much want to have both of these packages approved together. The goal is, according to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, so the leader in the House and then the leader in the Democrat who hold probably the most power right next to Joe Biden about what's happening, they are now going to try to modify these stimulus, so both of the fourth stimulus packages, in order to try to create something that will hopefully accommodate both sides so that they can approve it together. But there's even more than that, is that because we also do have many of the Republicans that we know, or the more just moderate slash conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. The idea is that they will probably have to lower the budget even lower, or not even lower, but just lower than the 3.5 trillion in order to try to appeal, or basically try to convince both of them to try to get on board. So the idea, what they're really working on is that they want to now create something where both packages are something that will make both sides or everyone happy, but that they can also maybe drop the budget so it will make essentially the moderate Democrats try to join in as well. And that's really the biggest thing. Programs that will potentially be changed are pretty much things that vary, such as about like the childcare situation, things like paid leave, healthcare, education, so things for like schools, climate change, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all sorts of different, and then a lot of just funding for just general infrastructure projects. So that's really the biggest thing that they're really hoping to try to work on right now at this current time. Now, in terms of why these specific dates that we laid out are going to be very particularly important, is because the first date, as just mentioned, which is pretty much going to be October 31st. The reason why I believe they picked that date is just because, first off, is that because it's the last day of October, it looks like, just aesthetically and visually, like a very clean number to work with, or clean date to work with. But it's also because it happens to be the date before the date that they need to approve some kind of transportation funding. Because as mentioned, is that every single department within the government has a particular amount of money, and the transportation department is potentially going to be impacted, so they need to try to do it for that date. But there's an even more significant date, and I think this is the reason why it is believed, and would make sense actually by a lot of people that are now wondering about when the next date is, or when they're going to actually approve it, why this package is probably going to approve before the end of this month, if not hopefully even earlier. And it's actually really because of the debt ceiling that's going on October 18th, which we just mentioned. And the reason is because right now at this current time, the governor or the government owes a lot of money. And because in order to try to fund, and it's not even just about the stimulus packages now at this point, but it's even about just keeping things in our country running again, or just to continue running, they have to essentially raise the debt ceiling. Because if they don't end up raising the debt ceiling, then it is very, very likely that the government will now potentially run out of money. This means that a lot of things in our country is going to potentially be impacted. We've kind of talked about a couple of these things, but maybe as a quick recap, is, for example, things such as like social programs, whether this has to do with Social Security, government funding. But probably why this is even more particularly important is because now even many people in Congress are going to be impacted, because a lot of them, so say, for example, you happen to be the governor of a particular state. You are probably going to be someone that, hopefully, if you do care about your state, but at the very, very least, just for political reasons, want to essentially do things for your state, such as like funding projects, programs, whether this has to do with social programs or just infrastructure programs, the things such as like roads, buildings, highways, things that these politicians hopefully care about, even if it's things such as like the stock market. So why this is important is because if they don't do this, it means that a lot of things are going to potentially now be shut down. So in a lot of ways, we've essentially tied hands. Essentially, the best way to describe it is that, like, when we do things just in regular life, every single person kind of has a bill to pay, so for example, we have to pay our electric bills, our rent, just bills in general. But if we struggle to pay our bills, then what ends up happening, sadly, is that we now have to basically sell or give up certain things about our typical lifestyle. So whether this has to be things like selling our car, reducing a cost, our cable, our light, electricity. And very, very similar is that the government also has their own bills. They have to pay for things such as like funding for their own services, resources, to hire people, to just run the country in general. So when we don't pay our bills, so we as people, we sadly have to now start to sell or lose certain services. And similarly now, the government is also in a very similar situation, that if they don't raise the debt ceiling, they may potentially have to default, which means that they also don't have the money to be able to pay their own debt, their own bills, to be able to keep the country running. And it's because of that reason now they are even in danger of having to try to approve or do something by the end of this month, preferably by October 18th, give or take a couple of days, because that's when they really predict the money is going to potentially now become very, very particularly tight. I do know several programs that are on the line are things especially such as like state, local government, funding, FEMA, disaster relief, of course social programs as we just mentioned. So what this means is that regardless of whether this is actually for the people or for more just very self-centered reasons, the idea is that if they run out of money, it also means that a lot of things on their own personal interest side is going to be impacted, even if it's through things such as like the stock market, money for their own, let's just say they want to improve a building or an infrastructure or a highway. All of that is going to now potentially be impacted. It is very, very possible that the interest rates might start to go up in order to make it so that the banks or the financial groups are able to now try to raise up money to kind of pay back a lot of that stuff. And if interest rates rise, this also does mean is that the stock market is going to potentially be impacted, and even businesses, because, and I guess this is a little bit more about just economics and business in general, so we won't dive as deep into it, but the fast answer to how this works is that many businesses, companies, programs, they sometimes operate on a loan. So if you increase the interest rates, it also means that they owe back even more money, and it also potentially will eat into their profit margins, which means that a lot of businesses will physically make less money, and it also means that the stock market will also potentially be impacted as well. And that is how everything is kind of connected. Of course, that's a little bit more deep into economics that we'll probably talk about in another day. So hopefully you guys found that relatively insightful. If you guys did, maybe consider smashing the like button, consider subscribing, hitting the bell for similar videos, and as always, feel free to comment any questions, thoughts about honestly just really anything, or predictions about what you think is going to come about from this. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.